"She's not even on the list," my father said with a chuckle. The laughter wasn't loud, but it was sharp, clean, and casual, like slicing a ribbon at a ceremony meant for someone else. I stood just a few steps from the banquet entrance of the Navy Officers Club, one hand still on my ID, the other tightening around the handle of my uniform bag. Across the marble foyer, I saw my brother Eric dressed in full mess whites basking in the center of attention. And me. I was standing next to a security officer who had just confirmed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't on the guest list." It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a clerical error or an overlooked line on a spreadsheet. It was deliberate. The seating chart had been arranged by my mother, the invite list double-checked by my father, Captain Thomas Carter, retired. And this evening, this grand retirement celebration that doubled as a promotion party for my brother was being billed as a Carter family military legacy event. And still they left me out. I didn't say anything. Not to the young officer awkwardly holding his tablet. Not to my father, who had clearly heard the exchange, but now conveniently found the punch bowl fascinating. Not to my mother, who glanced toward me once, and then looked quickly away, like I was an unplanned problem someone else would handle. Eric saw, of course. He always did. He smiled, not cruelly, not mockingly, just smugly. The kind of smile you offer a loser at the end of a game you never thought they'd win anyway. He turned to his wife and said something quietly. I didn't hear it, but her laughter floated in my direction. I stood there in my beige trench coat, civilian clothes underneath. I hadn't worn the uniform in. I had planned to change, quietly reveal myself with grace, make a soft entrance. But grace only works in rooms where people are looking for it. Here, I was invisible, by design. The hall behind them sparkled with white linens and navy blue banners. A slideshow of family photos played on a mounted screen. I caught a glimpse of one Eric in his academy days, standing proudly with my father. I knew that photo well. I was in the background of it, slightly out of focus, clapping. The crowd inside the banquet hall roared in laughter again. Someone had likely told a story about Dad's days on the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Or maybe about Eric's recent commendation for leading a joint logistics exercise off the Horn of Africa. A Navy legacy. That's what they called it. The Carter name carried on by Eric the Heir. I turned back to the young petty officer. His face was full of quiet apology, like he knew I didn't belong out here, but also couldn't do anything about it. "Ma'am, I'd have to call it in. I really can't let anyone not on the list through. Not tonight." He was just doing his job. So was I. I nodded, stepped back, and walked toward the side of the building out of sight. I could have called someone. I had connections, rank, authority. But what I needed right now wasn't clearance. It was clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a memory being repeated. It had always been this way. Family photos where I was cropped out literally and figuratively. Holiday dinners where Eric got the head seat at the table even before he'd commissioned. Stories about service that ended with, "Well, your brother's the real deal." My dad never yelled at me, never hit me. He just dismissed me, quietly, consistently, systematically. He once told a Navy friend of his, not knowing I was standing behind the doorway. "Beth's not like Eric. She's smart, but not a warfighter. She's more admin." That was the year I made lieutenant commander. Tonight was his moment. A full career in the Navy, 35 years, 4 deployments, commanding officer on 3 vessels. Enough medals to fill a wall. He deserved the celebration. What he didn't deserve was to rewrite history by erasing part of it. Because I'd been serving too. Quietly, steadily, relentlessly, through black sites and foreign ports, through war rooms and quiet midnight calls to prevent another body count. But he never asked, never wanted to know what I actually did. And I stopped offering it. Because offering your truth to people who've already decided to ignore it is just another form of humiliation. I walked toward the back entrance, hands steady. My uniform bag swinging at my side, crisp whites folded inside like a declaration waiting to be unsealed. "She's not even on the list." He laughed when he said it, like I was some errant stranger trying to crash a wedding. But when I walked in full dress, 3 stars gleaming on each shoulder, I knew what would happen. They'd stand. Not for me, but for what I represented. And that would be enough. We grew up in Coronado, California, where military life wasn't just normal, it was sacred. Our street had more flags than mailboxes. Our neighbors were SEALs, pilots, engineers. Every weekend, you could hear taps playing from the naval base across the water, and on the 4th of July, it felt like the whole town stood in uniform. My father, Captain Thomas Carter, was a name people recognized. Not because he sought attention that would have gone against everything he stood for, but because he commanded with that old-school salt and iron kind of discipline. Even when he was off duty, he carried himself like a man who had somewhere important to be, someone to report to. And Eric was born into the story our father wanted to tell. He was loud, bold, athletic. He won every Little League trophy and gave every teacher a reason to believe in leadership potential. He talked like he was already enlisted. He knew how to salute before he could spell it. I was the other one. I didn't cause trouble, didn't ask for much, didn't cry when he forgot my middle school awards night. I just stayed quiet. Books were easier than people. Patterns made more sense than praise. I liked puzzles, codes, anything I could study alone quietly and solve. When Eric got accepted to the Naval Academy, our backyard turned into a parade ground. My father grilled steaks the size of car tires. Veterans and junior officers packed the lawn. Everyone toasted the next Carter to wear command gold. My mom brought out a sheet cake that said, "Future Admiral." I still remember the way Dad beamed, standing beside him, his arm draped around Eric's shoulders, like they'd already won a war together. And me? I handed out napkins. No one asked what I'd been working on. No one noticed that 3 days earlier, I'd won a national cyber defense competition hosted by DARPA. When I mentioned it at dinner, Dad paused, nodded, and said, "That's nice, Beth, but it's not a commission." He wasn't cruel, just calibrated. He understood rank, duty, valor. What he didn't understand or want to understand was intelligence work, strategy, the quiet part of warfare that didn't involve helmets or flight decks. To him, I was backup, a supporting actress in the Carter family military legacy film. So when I applied to the Naval Academy, I did it without telling anyone. Not out of rebellion, I just didn't want to deal with the look on his face if I failed. When the letter came in the mail, I remember holding it in my hands for a full hour before opening it. My palms were sweating so badly it left a damp ring on the envelope. I didn't tell anyone for 3 days. Then one evening, as Dad read the paper and Eric practiced knot tying drills on the porch, I stood in the doorway and said, "I got in." He didn't look up, just turned a page and said, "Let's not make a fuss." At the academy, I felt more at home than I ever had under my own roof. Everything had structure, order, quiet pride. No one cared that I didn't talk much. What mattered was how fast I learned, how well I performed, and I performed. I wasn't the strongest cadet, but I was top 3 in signals intelligence and war game simulations. I could outplan half the class without raising my voice. By the end of my 2nd year, instructors were already marking my name with potential for command intelligence track. Back home, none of that made it into the Christmas letter. That year, the update read, "Eric continues to excel in naval operations. Beth is still working hard on her studies." Still working hard? I'd just been awarded cadet commander of my unit, and my own father reduced it to working hard. There's a kind of loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from being surrounded by people who only see the outline of you. My family saw a shadow. Eric became a surface warfare officer. My father showed up at his pinning ceremony with polished shoes and a camera. He gave a speech. They both cried. The base commander gave them a private toast. When I got my first Navy commission as an intelligence officer, I received a card in the mail with 5 words. "Proud of you. Stay safe, Dad." I kept that card in my drawer for years, not because it meant something, but because it was the most direct praise I'd ever gotten from him. It would have been easy to grow bitter, but I didn't. I grew strategic. I stopped waiting for recognition. I stopped trying to make him proud. I focused on my work because my work didn't lie. My work saw me, measured me, promoted me. I learned how to stay invisible until it was time to stand. And tonight would be that time. They think I push paper. That's the running joke in my family, if they even bother to mention me. That I sit in a climate-controlled office, pushing forms, reviewing spreadsheets, adjusting reports written by real officers, doing real things. It's easier for them to believe that. Because the truth doesn't fit in a holiday dinner conversation. The truth isn't family-friendly. It doesn't wear medals or show up in news headlines. The truth is quiet, classified, and lives in windowless rooms 4 stories underground. The truth is, I run a war no one talks about. After commissioning, I chose naval intelligence not because it was easy, but because it required precision, quiet leadership, deep thinking. And I was good at it. My first assignment was on the USS Winston S. Churchill, embedded in a tactical data team. They called me the Watchtower because I caught threats before they happened. I didn't shout. I didn't slam fists on tables. I asked questions no one else thought to ask. I was promoted to lieutenant, then lieutenant commander, then commander, all ahead of schedule. Each time I called home. Each time I got a brief congratulations from my mother and a silent phone from my father. Eric got headlines. I got clearance upgrades. By 37, I had a code name and a corridor in the Pentagon where only 7 people in the building could follow. They assigned me to a command structure so sensitive, even our email domains weren't visible in the defense directory. We operated in the Cell, a 24-hour black-level coordination unit for cyber warfare and geopolitical threat response. We weren't a think tank. We were action, real-time, global, deadly serious. Our job to stop the next war before it starts without anyone knowing we did it. One night in 2020, I worked a 37-hour shift, tracking data packets moving through a Baltic satellite relay. It was subtle, a few milliseconds of delay in GPS corrections. No one else caught it. But I did. Those delays were masking a state-sponsored signal, spoofing attempt that, if successful, would have redirected a destroyer group right into a mined sea corridor. That destroyer, the USS Newport Eric's ship. He never knew. None of them knew. They sent me a photo a week later of Eric smiling in front of the Newport's mast with a caption. "Our warrior," my mother added. "Glad he's got the Lord watching over him." I almost replied, or maybe a little sister with a 10-person data team and 2 caffeine IVs. But I didn't, because this wasn't about proving anything to them. This was about doing the job. In 2022, I was moved to a subterranean command facility on the East Coast. Technically, it didn't exist. In practice, it ran more foreign operations than half the combined active fleet. I briefed admirals, advised NSA subcommittees, oversaw real-time intercepts. They called me Admiral behind closed doors before the official star ever came. And the strange thing is, I didn't miss being seen. Until one day I did. It was a Tuesday. I'd just gotten home from a double shift coordinating an urgent rescue op for a hostage team in Niger. We diverted an entire arm of a drone fleet to create a thermal distraction so our men could exfil with 0 casualties. We succeeded. At 4:12 a.m., I took off my boots and sat in the dark with a cup of stale coffee and an ache behind my eyes that went deeper than exhaustion. And then I saw a message from my mother in the family group chat. "So proud of Eric." Another article, they're saying he might be up for Rear Admiral someday. My father replied, "He's earned it. One of the few still doing the work that matters." No one tagged me. No one asked how I was. No one knew that I already had 2 stars on my shoulder boards waiting in my closet for the day the Navy made it public. They think I wear a skirt suit and answer phones. They think I manage reports. The reality: I manage silence, risk, geopolitical storms before their headlines. I make peace with the idea that no one will ever stand for me, because if they do, it means I failed to keep something secret. Still, there was one thing that kept me tethered to something real. One single commendation, signed in ink, hand-delivered by a 4-star. It read, "Commander Elizabeth Carter, is personally responsible for the successful disarmament of a multinational threat with zero loss of American life. It didn't come with a parade, but it came with purpose. The rank promotion to Rear Admiral came through late on a Wednesday. I sat alone in the briefing room when the message popped up. No cameras, no champagne, no hugs. Just a text. Effective ZO700. Rear Admiral E. Carter, by order of SecNav. I looked down at the silver stars in my desk drawer. I thought about calling home. But what would I say? Hey, Dad, I just outranked your golden boy. That wasn't who I was. Not then. But maybe I'm done being invisible. Not for ego, not for applause. But because if I don't stand in that room with my full rank, someone else will write the story. And I've spent my life letting them write it wrong. No more. The day of the Carter family legacy. Gala my father's retirement and Eric's promotion was soaked in spring sunlight and ceremony. They picked a grand venue just outside Norfolk, a military country club built like a cathedral of rank. Marble steps, mahogany trim flags flanking every doorway. The kind of place where uniforms weren't just worn, they were worshipped. It was invitation only. Strictly military, the email said. The irony, I was the only Carter still in active duty who wasn't on the list. I arrived 15 minutes early dressed like a civilian. A tan trench coat over slacks and a black blouse. Nothing that drew attention? Not yet. I approached the main gate, handed over my ID. The young petty officer manning the tablet was polite, too polite. He scanned the list, scanned it again. Brows tightened, mouth thinned. Ma'am, I'm sorry, he said, lowering his voice like he was apologizing for the weather. You're not listed under the Carter family reservation. The confirmed guests are Captain Thomas Carter, Mrs. Angela Carter, Commander Eric Carter, and family. That's it. He turned the tablet around like it was proof. I already knew. I thanked him anyway, and stepped to the side, heart pounding behind a practiced calm. I stood there, letting the moment settle into my spine. The air smelled like manicured grass and leather polish. Officers and their families drifted past in clusters. Ribbons, gleaming shoes, shined, laughter rising. And then I saw them. The black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Eric first, tall, handsome, bronze-skinned from his latest assignment, wearing his mess whites like a movie star in costume. My mother followed, her hands fluttering around her pearls. Then my father's strong chin chest forward, even in retirement. He still walked like he was inspecting a fleet. They saw me and paused. Eric leaned toward his wife, smiling. Probably a mix-up. She should have married a real officer. I heard it. So did the guard. My father didn't even look at me, just placed his hand on Eric's shoulder and steered him toward the entrance like I wasn't there, like I never had been. That moment didn't hurt the way you'd think it would. It didn't burn. It didn't sting. It didn't even shock, because I'd been here before. I'd stood outside family dinners, professional circles, life milestones, watching the narrative close around Eric like a fitted uniform. But something shifted that day. The silence around me, the careful, polite, suffocating silence, cracked. Something inside me stood up. Not this time. I turned and walked calmly toward the parking lot, past the valet, unlocked the door to my government sedan, popped the trunk. Inside a garment bag, secured and folded, marked with my name. Rear Admiral Elizabeth Carter. I took it out with both hands and laid it across the back seat. Smoothed the crease. No trembling, no fury, just focus. Inside the venue, I'd been told they were preparing the slideshow. Carter family photos, Eric in combat gear, my father on deck, arms crossed, wind at his back. No pictures of me, of course. No evidence of my 22-year career. That was fine, because what I was about to show them wouldn't fit on a screen. It required standing. I changed in the car, not rushed, deliberate, like a ritual. Dress whites, pressed, immaculate, every button closed with care, every insignia pinned precisely. The silver stars sat at attention on my shoulders, polished to a gleam. Rear Admiral, not acting, not honorary, commissioned. Earned. I looked in the rearview mirror. A woman stared back. Sharp, calm. I'd seen that face in classified briefings before combat deployments, but now for the first time, it was personal. I stepped back out into the sunlight. This time, the petty officer at the gate noticed me before I reached him. His eyes widened slightly. He stiffened. "Ma'am?" he said, already half at attention. I didn't realize." "You weren't supposed to," I said gently. I held up my ID again. He scanned it, and this time his scanner lit green. There it was, a flag officer override, full access. No question. Behind him, I could already hear the opening remarks begin. A crowd settling, a microphone tapping. Time was moving now, but I was calm. I didn't rush. I didn't fix my hair. I didn't even straighten my lapel. I just walked forward past the security post, through the wide entrance of the club down the hallway, lined with service plaques and portraits of other men with stars. And with each step, I felt the weight of silence dissolve. Not because they let me in, because I was done waiting for permission. The hallway to the staging room was empty, thick carpet beneath my shoes, wood-paneled walls lined with framed citations and oil paintings of men in gold braid, most of them long dead, all of them looking like they belonged. I wondered briefly how many women had walked this same hallway wearing 3 stars, fewer than I could count on one hand. Maybe that's why I walked slowly, not out of nerves, but out of reverence for all the battles that had brought me here, some with foreign adversaries, others closer to home. The lounge behind the main stage was quiet and cold. A side door marked authorized personnel only had been left ajar. I stepped inside, took one breath, and locked it behind me. My eyes scanned the room, leather chairs, a coat rack, a mirror, a small table with bottles of water, neatly stacked ceremony programs. I set down my uniform bag and unzipped it fully for the first time that day. Inside my full-dress white uniform, gleaming, crisp, immaculate. I laid it out on the table like it was a flag. And maybe, in some way, it was the flag of who I really was. Not the version they joked about over Thanksgiving. Not the afterthought at Christmas. But the real me. As I began to change my mind, moved backward. Not to pain this time, but to power. Operation Lion Wake, Somalia, 2018. A Navy SEAL recon team trapped behind hostile lines with comms jammed and no viable exfil. 24 hours to extraction, and I was the one who rerouted an entire surveillance satellite from a Russian theater to give them thermal coverage. The Joint Chiefs called it a miracle. We called it Tuesday. I pinned the first star to my left shoulder board. Click. Operation Halberd. South China Sea, 2020. An unmarked cargo vessel carrying radioactive material flagged by our data team. Within 12 hours, I'd coordinated a joint interception with the Australians and MI6, neutralizing the threat and preventing a potential maritime incident that could have escalated into full-blown crisis. Eric had no idea. No one in my family did. They were too busy writing another glowing family newsletter about his promotion to commander. Click. The second star went on my right. Operation Solstice Drift. Classified. All I can say is I stopped something terrible, and no one ever knew. Click. The third star. The last one. It rested perfectly in line with the others, not as decoration, but as proof. I turned to face the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't angry. She wasn't even cold. She was calm, complete. I hadn't dressed like this in public since the promotion. The Navy had kept the ceremony quiet in a private room, no cameras, no public record. Just the flag, a small gathering of peers, and the steady voice of the Admiral who read my citation. For sustained meritorious service of the highest caliber in positions of global strategic command. No one in my family attended. They didn't even know it happened. I slipped on the white cover, adjusted the brim just above my brow. Then I sat for a moment, and I remembered Christmas 2 years ago. Eric had shown up late, still in uniform, and Dad made a toast to the Carter family warriors. Everyone had clapped, except me. I'd just gotten back from an emergency intelligence brief in Bahrain. I hadn't slept in 36 hours. My dress uniform was still hanging in the car. I hadn't worn it inside because I didn't want to upstage my brother. When I told Dad where I'd been, he nodded once and said, "Hope they didn't work you too hard at the office?" I stood. No more shrinking, no more hiding behind beige trench coats or polite silence. I was walking into that ceremony not as a daughter, not as a sister, not even as a Carter. I was walking in as an admiral in the United States Navy. I opened the door to the hallway and stepped out. Music was playing. A string ensemble near the front of the banquet hall had begun a soft, instrumental version of Anchors Aweigh. The room was packed, maybe 300 officers, friends, family, all facing forward, all waiting. I stood in the back, still unnoticed. Then a familiar voice came through the speaker system. "Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We'd like to begin the formal portion of this evening's ceremony by welcoming the guest of honor, Captain Thomas Carter." Applause erupted. My father rose from the table at the center of the room, smiling modestly as he walked toward the stage. My mother dabbed the corner of her eyes. Eric stood next, taking the podium. My father is a quiet man, but what he's done for this country and for this family speaks volumes. And tonight, we honor the legacy he built and the future we continue. A nod to tradition, predictable, clean. Then I heard it. And so as we welcome my father to the stage, I ask all Carter family officers to join us in the front row. There was a pause. Then someone whispered behind me, "Wait, there's another Carter?" Time slowed. I stepped forward. One step, then two. A ripple moved through the crowd. Heads turning, hands lowering glasses, murmurs building. They saw the white uniform first, then the stars. And then like a wave breaking, it happened. The Navy SEALs rose first. Those who knew, who had read the briefings, who had seen my call sign in classified logs, who owed me their lives. And they shouted, not a cheer, not applause, but a formal military cry. "Admiral Carter, front row." And 300 men stood. The sound of 300 Navy SEALs rising in unison is unlike anything else. It doesn't rumble. It detonates. Chairs scraped backward across polished floor. Metals clinked against ribbons. Commands barked quietly between ranks. Men who'd spent years learning to move, as one now stood together, arms at their sides, spines straight. Admiral Carter, front row. And just like that, the banquet transformed. All eyes turned from Eric, from my father, from the slideshows and staged remarks. They turned to me. Rear Admiral Elizabeth Carter. I didn't need to shout. I didn't even need to speak. I just walked. The first rows parted like the Red Sea. Someone whispered my name, but I kept my gaze steady, forward, controlled. This wasn't anger. This was arrival. As I passed through the aisle, I felt the moment ripple outward, not just shock recognition. Vice Admiral Torres, sitting 3 tables in, blinked and nodded. Rear Admiral Voss actually rose to his feet again and saluted. I gave him a respectful incline of my head. Protocol said nothing about acknowledging a salute in this setting, but I wasn't here for protocol. I was here for truth. My mother had both hands clutched against her chest. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came. My father didn't move. His glass of water remained half-raised, mid-toast, frozen between expectation and denial. "Eric." His expression was blank. Not embarrassment, not shame. Just confusion. Like the math didn't compute. Like someone had hacked his version of reality and swapped out the variables. "Beth," he mouthed silently. At the front row, I took my seat. Not behind them. Not next to them. But ahead. A junior officer approached, flushed and anxious, and handed me a printed program. "Ma'am? We didn't know you'd be attending. Your name." "Was never submitted," I finished calmly. "Yes, I noticed." He blinked, nodded, swallowed hard. "We'll adjust the order of recognition." I nodded. "Carry on." He scurried off like a man who knew he'd just handed a seating chart to someone with nuclear launch authority. Eric eventually returned to the mic. He tried to smile, tried to recover, but his voice faltered. "Well, it seems our family legacy continues in ways I hadn't fully appreciated." Soft, nervous chuckles. He gestured to me. Let's all give a warm round of applause to Rear Admiral Elizabeth Carter. Scattered claps followed, polite, uncertain. Not disrespectful, just confused. Because the narrative had changed, and no one had rehearsed this version. After the formalities ended and my father was honored with his flag in a glass case, the crowd broke into smaller orbits. Drinks clinked, hors d'oeuvres passed. The low hum of chatter returned. I stood by the far window sipping water, calm, alone. I didn't chase anyone. I didn't wait. But they came. First Vice Admiral Torres. Admiral Carter, he said, offering his hand. It's an honor. We'd crossed paths only once before a joint exercise over Iceland. I remembered him by how precisely he folded his briefing notes. Didn't expect you here, he said quietly. They're still catching up. I gave a small smile. So am I. Then came Commander Jansen, one of the SEALs from Operation Lion Wake. He said nothing at first, just nodded, then looked at me with the kind of gratitude that doesn't need translation. You got us home, he said finally. That was enough. Eric approached last. Not immediately, not with swagger. He looked tired, deflated, like a man who had just found out he wasn't the protagonist after all. How long, he asked. 15 years, I said. He nodded slowly, eyes scanning my uniform as if still unsure it wasn't part of some elaborate prank. You outrank me. It wasn't said with venom. Just awe. I do, I replied. But that's not what matters. Then what does... I finished my water, set the glass down. What matters is how long you assumed I didn't. My father stood behind him, arms crossed. Not stiff, not hostile, just quiet, watching. We held eye contact for the first time in years. No salute, no handshake, just a slow, uncertain nod, like the beginning of a sentence. By the end of the evening, I was the last Carter standing in the hall. Literally. They'd all gone. My mother had kissed my cheek, brief, tight, tearful. My father had shaken my hand. My brother had said nothing more. But as I walked to the exit, the young petty officer at the front stood sharply. Good evening, Admiral. I returned the gesture, stepped into the night air, and smiled. Not because I'd proven them wrong, but because I'd finally stopped trying. 6 months later, I visited my parents' house for the first time in years. It was quiet. A Sunday afternoon in Virginia Beach, wind brushing the porch like a whisper. The house hadn't changed much. Same creaky swing, same flag out front. But something inside was different. I stepped into the living room, and there against the far wall was the Carter family display cabinet. Newly built, glass-fronted, dark cherry wood. My father stood beside it polishing the glass. Not obsessively, not for show, just careful. Like it mattered. Inside, I saw the rows of decorations, his medals from Vietnam, Eric's Navy, commendation, a folded flag from my grandfather's funeral. But in the center, eye level, unmistakable, was my Distinguished Service Medal. Framed next to it, a photo I hadn't known existed. Me on stage in full white uniform, shaking hands with Vice Admiral Torres, 3 stars shining on each shoulder. And beneath that, a small brass plaque, engraved. Rear Admiral Elizabeth Carter, U.S. Navy Intelligence Command Service, beyond recognition. Valor beyond applause. My father noticed me staring. He straightened, cleared his throat. I thought it was time the cabinet told the whole story. It wasn't an apology, but it was something more valuable. Acknowledgement. That evening over dinner, something shifted. Eric talked about his new assignment in a different tone. Less performative, more real. He asked me how my team handled chain of command disputes. I answered, and he listened. My mother asked if I'd ever considered teaching at the academy. They need women like you, she said gently. Smart ones. The kind who've actually seen the world. That used to be the kind of comment that stung. Now it felt like an opening. Later, Eric and I sat outside on the porch swing, the same one where he once tied knots as a kid, while I read military history books in silence. We didn't talk at first, just watched the breeze play with the leaves. Then he turned to me. I'm sorry. The words were small, but heavy. He shook his head. I said some things I shouldn't have. I made a lot of assumptions about what mattered in this family, about what counted. He looked away. And the truth is, I was scared. That surprised me. Scared, I asked. He nodded. Of being second. I let that sink in, let the silence hold it without judgment. I didn't want to outshine you, I said. That's why I never wore the uniform around you. Never brought up my work. He smiled faintly. Turns out the shine wasn't something I could stop. You earned it. He paused, then added quietly. You always did. We sat a little longer. And for the first time, I felt it not just peace, but equality. Not the ceremonial kind. Not medals or seats or handshakes. But real human-level respect. It felt fragile, like glass. But it was there. As I got up to leave, my father met me at the door. He didn't try to hug me, didn't say anything grand. But he looked me in the eye. And this time, he didn't look away. You make the Navy proud, Admiral, he said. A beat. And you made me proud too. I just didn't know how to say it. I nodded once. Not because I needed the words, but because they mattered more now that I didn't need them. Later that night, I stood in my apartment in D.C., looking at the stars outside the window. Real stars. Not silver, not stitched onto a shoulder. I thought about all the years I'd spent chasing approval, chasing applause, chasing a place at the table. And now I didn't need a chair anymore. I had a command. I had purpose. I had peace. Blood had built the Carter name, but I'd rebuilt the meaning. With work no one saw, with silence no one praised, with service that asked for nothing and finally received everything. If this story moved you, if you've ever stood outside the room waiting for someone to notice who you already were, then you're not alone. At Honorline, we tell stories like this because quiet victories matter. Your story matters. And if you believe that honor is greater than blood, hit subscribe, leave a comment, or share this with someone who's still waiting to be seen. They deserve their front row too.